Welcome to another episode of 2021 War Room Reports. We have a fantastic co-host on tonight, Alex Gilstrap. He's a guy that I've seen across the, NFL draft Twitter stratosphere last year with his big board and really liked his talent. I'm not gonna lie, not gonna sugarcoat anything. He was introduced to me by way of Ryan Roberts, so I really respect his opinion. Really respect Alex Gilstrap's talent that he brings to the game. This guy works for NFL Draft Bible, Sports Illustrated featured, contributor. So, Alex, how's it going? And let people know how they can find you on social media and if you have any projects coming.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on first and foremost. This is exciting time. This is year round. I focus on the NFL draft and all these prospects, and like you said, putting out that big board every year and that horizontal draft board that I tweet out every year. I actually just recently came out with mine for the 2021 class of 300 prospects with finalized grades. I have it both on a big board and as a horizontal draft board, sorting them by tiers. So if you want to check me out, I'm on Twitter at Alex Gilstrap, and you can see my work at NFL Draft Bible. I'm putting out some Falcons content, some NFL Draft content. So we got a lot of things going on over there that you can come check me out.
Absolutely, man. You sound like me cranking through those numbers, man. Every year I try to, it's almost like a paranoia. You don't want to miss out on any prospects. And you just keep on watching guys. It gets to the 300, then it gets to 400. And then you look around, you might watch 500 plus prospects and like, what is going on? But the difference between me and you is you've actually shared that information. You put it in a more practical format by letting people know, okay, this is how the draft goes. Here's my big board. Here's how I tier it. And that's actually how NFL draft rooms work. So I definitely commend you on that. But let's get this thing started. I'm going to share my screen and show my quarterback rankings on my website. Hopefully you can see it. Can you see that?
Yes, I see it. I see Trey Lance right now.
All right. So if the viewers want to check this out, blog.thebarnesuniversity.com, it will be updated with all positions, top 20, top 25 guys before the draft. But as you can see, this was done on New Year's Day, actually. So we're going to have some guys that we may not know didn't, come out in the 2021 draft. So I'm going to go ahead and say I had Desmond Ridder on here. But the reason why I'm using this one is because I wanted to be organic. I wanted my thoughts to be whatever they were at the time. So, Alex, we got at number one, Trevor Lawrence. I think that's pretty much across the board for everybody. There's some that may think differently. Number two for me was Zach Wilson. Three, Trey Lance. Four, Justin Fields. Five, Mac Jones. Ridder was there, like I said. And even if you want to comment on him, I know that's next year and beyond, but you can comment on him. Seven, Kellen Mond. Eight, Kyle Trask. Nine, Sam Ellinger. Shane Buechele at 10. And then these some other guys here at the 11 through 21. I will have to say that my updated one, I'm going to throw it in there is, Justin Fields has reclaimed his spot at 3. Other big decisions, Kyle Trask has moved up to like 6 or 7, and then Davis Mills is at 6 or 7. They're kind of interchangeable for me. And then we have Kellen Mond right there with the physical ability. And then on the back end, I think my biggest riser is probably Felipe Franks. I've come to like his game, his size a little bit as a developmental guy late in the process. But what do you think about this overall? What do you think about the quarterback class overall? And then obviously this top 10 in my updated top 10.
Yeah, no, for sure. The top four for me is clear cut, and that does not include Mac Jones. Out of these quarterbacks that are rumored to go in the top 10 here, I think all four of them are worthy of a top 10 draft pick. I can't really argue too much with the order you have them in. I think their finalized grade for me all came within a small little a small room for error there. So Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, that's the order I have it in personally. But like I said, I can't fault you for thinking Zach Wilson is QB2 over Trey Lance and Justin Fields, just because, that's the way the quarterback position's going is his ability to create when things break down. That's what Patrick Mahomes does so well. And everyone's looking for the Patrick Mahomes, the next Patrick Mahomes. And if you see a lot of the similarities, the ability to work off script in Zach Wilson's game. So I see you have him at 2. And though I don't have him there, I can't argue with you too much because, like I said, the level of play that he played in when finally healthy in his collegiate career in 2020 and the strides he took to improve this year was just really, really impressive. Obviously, you don't get Trey Lance. You had an up and down season from Justin Fields. So I can definitely, like I said, see a world where Zach Wilson is someone's QB2, and it sounds like he's the NFL's QB2 with him going probably second overall to the New York Jets. So, but you talked about Mac Jones kind of being that 5th guy. That's exactly where I have him. But I have him in a group with Davis Mills and Kyle Trask, who are 2 you said have risen since this article we're looking at in front of us was posted. And I really do think that's a tier of its own. Mac Jones, Davis Mills, Kyle Trask, and those are quarterbacks to me that one either in Davis Mills' respect is a talent. The physical tools are there. He can stretch the field vertically, but you only get a handful of starts from him in his collegiate career. He dealt with some knee injury issues. There are some question marks about him moving forward. And, when it comes to Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, to me, I think they do one thing really well, and that's get the football where it needs to go, and that's in the skill position players' hands. And there's room for them in the NFL. That both of them will probably see themselves at the top of the depth chart in the first couple of years of their career because they do such a good job at just distributing the football, which isn't sexy. It isn't something that you want to take in the first round necessarily, but it's something that has value at the end of the day. There are quarterbacks littered throughout the NFL that's what they do is they just distribute the football. Jimmy Garoppolo has earned a big payday from distributing the football. And though he looks like he's going to be out the door in San Francisco, he earned that payday. He brought a team to the Super Bowl because he has playmakers around him, and he did a good job of getting the football in the athletes' hands and letting them do the work. So that's kind of the limelight in which I see Mac Jones, Kyle Trask. And then for me, really the only 2 other quarterbacks in this year's draft class that I'm really interested in at any point is Jamie Newman and Kellen Mond. Kellen Mond being ahead of Jamie Newman, and that's just physical tools are there. You had some inconsistencies, some question marks about their play here. So Kellen Mond, I know you have him, 6 or 7, depending on where he ended up since this article with Desmond Ridder falling out of this year's draft class, and I have him at 8. So I'm really right there with you. I mean, the physical tools are there. He played a more consistent brand of football in 2020, something that we've been looking for what feels like 5 years now in Kellen Mond's game. Jamie Newman obviously taking the year off, not playing this year due to COVID. There's some question marks about what his career arc's going to look like, but the physical tools from athleticism and arm strength standpoint are there. But then after that, here's my argument when it comes to quarterbacks. And I brought this up on the podcast with Ryan, who you talked about, and Joe DeLeon, our other co-host over at the Believe Network, Believe in NFL Draft Prospects. Is we talked about late day 3 quarterbacks and how I just personally don't believe in them. Over the last 5 years, there's 27 quarterbacks that have been taken in rounds 6 and 7 combined. Only one of those has had any inkling of success in the NFL, and that's Gardner Minshew, obviously from a couple years ago, who started for the Jacksonville Jaguars, who's probably going to see his name off the first spot of the depth chart with Trevor Lawrence coming to town. But that's just my thing. If your ceiling is an NFL backup, which I see, once you get past Jamie Newman, Kellen Mond, those guys, you're talking about Sam Ellinger, you're talking about Shane Buechele, you're talking about Ian Book, Felipe Franks. Those guys, to me, their ceiling is an NFL backup. And for me, I don't know the value in that. Obviously, quarterbacks get hurt, but once your quarterback gets hurt, to me, you usually lose your chances of winning a Super Bowl, and that's the end-all goal. So having a high ceiling backup to me is just really not that intriguing. So for me, like I said, I have 9 draftable grades at the quarterback position this year, which is low relative to some other draft Twitter members, who see, Felipe Franks, all the tools in the world, but the way when the lights turn on, you just see all the inconsistencies in his game. His ability to distribute the football is just very inconsistent. So I just don't see a world where he is even an average starter in the NFL. So for me, I'm just out on that. I'd rather take a special teams worthy linebacker or corner in that position that I know I'm going to get some value on the field where I'm not going to get in Felipe Franks or Sam Ellinger or some of these guys.
I couldn't agree more. I think the project or the, fixer upper in a lot of us, we really want to kind of have that guy that Okay, he has the traits. Let's see what we can do. Let's try to fix him up. And I think that doesn't exist anymore, if it ever did. So that makes a ton of sense. We're going to transition to, kind of an ideology when evaluating quarterbacks. For me specifically, I would say that when I'm looking at a quarterback, the things that matter most is IQ and character. And then I'm going to look at, the projection of where they might be going. Ownership is incredibly important. And by ownership, I mean coaching staff and all that, and then obviously traits. So when you're looking at these prospects, what prospect do you think kind of has the highest quotient of all those things? IQ, character, he's going to be going to a good ownership situation, and then obviously he has the traits.
Yeah, for me, like Justin Fields is up there for me. I just love his toughness. You saw it in the college football playoff, taking the shot he did and doing everything he can to stay in that game and deliver the touchdown pass on that same drive where I honestly thought he broke his ribs. So, for me, like I said, Justin Fields is QB2, and a lot of that comes from his leadership. Everyone out of Ohio State raves about his work ethic, raves that which was in question at one point, which that's another rabbit hole I don't want to get into. Dan Orlowski came out and said something about Justin Fields not loving the game of football, and I don't know how you watch that college football playoff and think of anything other than the fact that this man is all football all day. So Justin Fields for me is one, but Trey Lance, that's my overall answer. Physical traits. I said this on a podcast yesterday. I think physically you have the highest ceiling in Trey Lance over even Trevor Lawrence. From an arm strength perspective, from an athleticism perspective, there's so much to the table that Trey Lance can bring to an NFL offense if used correctly. You pair that with his ability and his knowledge of the football, or knowledge of the game of football. Throughout this pre-draft process, he's been raved about for his ability to understand just the game of football. He just understands how the game works coming from the pro style offense in North Dakota State. He's just a whiteboard warrior. That's what I called him on a podcast earlier this week. He's a whiteboard warrior. Every time he gets put into the room and talking about schemes and talking about defensive movement and spatial awareness, Trey Lance aces it every single time. You don't have to question character on top of that. And then, like I said, the physical traits are there. The only questions with him is the 1-year starter at the FCS level. And it really comes down to how you value his one season that you got to see put on display. And obviously he had the one game in 2020, which me personally, I take with a grain of salt. That game was scheduled last minute. There wasn't the adequate time to prepare for that game. And when you're going throughout, practices and fall ball before the regular season kicks up and you realize you're not playing any games, there's just a different level of preparation than when you're preparing for 10, 12, 14 football games that season. So I take the 2020 game with a grain of salt. All the tools are there: arm strength, the knowledge of football IQ, the ability to run a pro style scheme, working under center, something that some of these quarterbacks have not been tasked with doing very much. And then just his football IQ and his leadership is just unquestioned. So for me, Trey Lance is one of those. He's an X factor, and I think if you put him in the right situation with the right ownership, like you alluded to, and the right coaching staff, I think the ceiling is astronomical for Trey Lance and his projection to the NFL.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I didn't know I'd agree with you this much, Alex, to be honest. It's right on par. And really, you talk about Justin Fields. It was so hard for me not to actually put him, at one at times because,
Yeah.
when you do this process, for those that don't know, it's a wave, man. It's a wave.
No, it is. Well, and especially for Justin Fields, I'm on record. I have a podcast. It's written record. I went on record, throughout the season saying Justin Fields is closer to Trevor Lawrence than he is to anybody else, in my opinion. And obviously that was before the Northwestern and the games the Indiana game, in which he struggled a little bit. You saw some of his negatives kind of come to the limelight a little bit, but he bounced back and he showed his toughness and he showed his grit and he showed just a level of play he can play at the biggest stage in the college football playoff. And to me, to this day, Justin Fields is closer to Trevor Lawrence than he is to everyone else. Trey Lance, a little bit more of a projection, whereas I feel Justin Fields and I feel like Justin Fields is going to be a good NFL player. And that just really baffles me when you talk about him sliding. It sounds like Zach Wilson's going to be the pick at 2. It sounds like Trey Lance may be the pick at 3 if it's not Mac Jones now. So To me, I just don't understand how this man's name is falling. You don't question his work ethic. You definitely don't reject any of the skill set that he has. He has a crazy good skill set from an athletic standpoint and an arm talent perspective. So, and he's played on the biggest stage and he's done well. He's shown that he can bounce back after adversity hits him. So, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, I'm really confident those two, if put in the right situation, are going to thrive at the NFL level.
Absolutely, and it was kind of asinine when people were talking about his processing ability. I mean, they kind of confused the fact that he. I will have to say he is deliberate. You know, he is a bit deliberate. He is a bit slow sometimes to deliver, but it's not the processing. It's just more of his laissez-faire attitude. I mean, he has to definitely hike up that sense of urgency, but that's just about it. I mean, other than that, I mean, the guy can ball. I will have to say, and we can just talk about this briefly because I know that the consensus of Mac Jones is, he's basically a statue type of player, and we're dealing with the prototypical Alabama possibly. But for me, I think that Mac Jones is a type of high level ball distributor that I think may surprise some people. Like I do have to agree with you, he is not on the caliber of the top four when it comes to those physical traits and then ceiling. But boy, is he knocking on that door for me, in terms of a high level ball distributor, a guy that has leadership, a guy that has that perfectionist in him, the guy that's going to win a lot of people over with intangibles. Um, and just to close, and I know, we both got busy schedules. We're going to talk about that big board of yours, especially this year. And what I really value about that horizontal, is you do break it down into tiers, and it shows the flow of how the draft may go. That's something that I think is very valuable. So, quickly, what would you think? What position do you think there would be like a high run on players, so that, like, for example, last year or prior years with the AJ Brown, I thought AJ Brown was a first round wide receiver. Just because I think he's a first round wide receiver, I didn't necessarily have to take him in the first round because he'd be there in the second round. So knowing the value of players and where they may be selected is very important. You add to that aspect of the game, because had I done that, or had the Titans done that, you wouldn't have gotten Jeffrey Simmons. So with that being said, what position do you think there's runs on, and how do you think it all balances out, off the top of the dome, if you remember?
Yeah, no, definitely. So you got to talk about the strengths of this class because I think that's where you'll see the runs because value will come when they're deep classes at certain positions. And for me, that starts at offensive tackle on the offensive side of the football. I think there's a ton of offensive tackles that project to being have the upside of Pro Bowl. That like truly, you talk about Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater who get all the attention, but in the first round especially, you can still see Christian Darrisaw, Samuel Cosme, Tevin Jenkins is someone that's probably going to hear his name called in the first round. And then that's not even to bring up, Spencer Brown and Jalen Mayfield, Dylan Radens, some of these guys that people really like in that top of the second round, Liam Eichenberg, and then my guy, Deontay Smith, who is the East Carolina offensive tackle that absolutely killed at the Senior Bowl throughout Senior Bowl week. So there's just so many guys. I mean, the list goes on and on at the offensive tackle position about guys that I think that can be taken in the top 50. Obviously, wide receiver being one of them. We see that every year. Everyone talks about wide receiver class being so dynamic and being one of the strongest classes in every year. I feel like year after year after year, we're talking about the wide receiver class being so deep and the wide receiver class being so deep. I really just think that's a testament to the athletes in college football nowadays. I really think that's going to be something that sticks. I don't think this wide receiver class is going to be any more impressive than next year's when it's all said and done. I just think every year you're going to see that caliber of athletes, the caliber of athletes you're willing to take in the first round and in second round, a bunch of them every single year. And wide receivers are just athletic at this point. You see a lot of running backs that are transitioning in high school to playing wide receiver because they know if they're an NFL caliber athlete, wide receivers where you're going to make your money for long term. Running backs don't last long in the NFL. So you see a lot of running back bodies, and you're talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're talking about Tylan Wallace, who could probably play the running back position in some schemes. And you're talking about Rondale Moore. Some of these real bulky guys that could play the running back position are playing wide receiver, and that's just because there's more longevity in the NFL. They can get paid more at the NFL level playing the wide receiver position. I think that's really what what is to blame? Amari Rogers, I don't know how I left him off. He probably is the closest to a running back in this year's class at the wide receiver position. But, you just talk about all these guys that, they probably could play running back, but I think in high schools now they're transitioning these plus athletes, that the athletes are wanting to play wide receiver position, knowing that if they make it to the NFL, that's where they're going to make their money. If I had to give one on defense, it's definitely the cornerback position. I love cornerback. If you don't know, is my favorite position to scout. I always have a great time scouting cornerbacks. They're just a lot of fun. I just love the trash talking mentality. So of course, I'm a big fan of JC Horn in that light, because I mean, he's all talk all the time, but he backs it up with physicality and the ability to shut men down at the line of scrimmage. But there's just, like I was talking about with offensive tackles, there's just a ton of names. I can hear their names called in the top 50. Obviously, Surtain and Horn headlining the group with Newsome, Caleb Farley, Eric Stokes, Asante Samuel Jr., Afitu Melifonwu, Elijah Molden, Tyson Campbell. The list goes on. There's going to be a run on the cornerback position, and I think you have the makings of having a dozen or so starting outside corners in this year's draft class. And then there's a ton of inside guys. I mentioned Asante Samuel Jr. I mentioned Elijah Molden, and you can continue to go down the board. Sean Wade best projects as an inside nickel cornerback, which is such a prevalent position in the NFL now, with so many teams focusing on the pass game and running 3 wide and 4 wide so often nowadays, that you have to have a slot cornerback. And so as that position is just becoming more and more valuable, you're seeing more of these great athletes playing inside, and that's just pushing their names up draft boards because they're becoming more and more important to success at the NFL level. So cornerback, offensive tackle, obviously wide receiver, like it is every year. Those are some of my favorite positions that I think you'll see in the top 100. You're going to see big runs on them early.
Makes sense. It's a pleasure to know that cornerback is one of your favorite positions, because I play the position as well. So with that being said, before we close, one more, and then we're going to close this thing out. Who is your favorite late or mid to late day 3 cornerback then? Mine, I'll let you know, we might share the same thing. Shakur Brown or DiCaprio Boodle.
DiCaprio Boodle, okay. Yeah, no, I have Shakur Brown as a 3rd round grade. So I'm right there with you. Like I'm big on Shakur Brown. He had an awesome 2020. So good athlete. He finally put it together. That's someone that I kind of circled his name over the summer as someone that I thought that could really improve. He had all the makings of being a good cornerback. He just hadn't yet put it all together. In 2020, he did that. Obviously a shortened schedule, but in those 7 or so games that they played, I mean, it was one game after another playing good brand of football. Another one that a lot of people, he also is an A+ name, is Rashad Wild Goose Jr. from Wisconsin. Good football player. He's probably going to play in the slot as a smaller frame guy, but he's not afraid to play up on you. Good coverage defender, silky smooth. So Rashad Wild Goose Jr. is someone that I think is probably going to be taken in the middle of day 3, excuse me, that I think could probably start by the middle of the season. That's just the kind of player he is on the inside.
Well, Alex, what can I say, man? You're an all-star, man. Thanks for hopping on such short notice. Definitely respect your game, and I'll definitely be following your journey from here on out. I'll let you close. If you have any closing remarks as far as what you're doing next, I know you said it kind of in the intro. I know you're doing you're co-host of a podcast. Might want to give them the addy on that. And then after that, we'll close this thing out, man.
Yeah, no, well, first and foremost, appreciate you having me on. You can go listen to our podcast if you want to hear me, Ryan, and Joe talk more NFL draft all year round at the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you can get podcasts. My last remark is Trey Lance is going number 3 overall. You heard it here first. I know this is going to be posted here shortly. Trey Lance, I hope this comes in before the draft, and I'm sure it will. Trey Lance is going to be the pick at the San Francisco 49ers. That is my hot take. I know it's leaning Mac Jones. Trey Lance is going to be the pick.
You heard it here first. Alex Gilstrap. Thanks, man. I'll holler at you, man. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.